Hey gang, Roden here. Welcome on back to the Cade and another episode of Sports Saturday. And what we're going to do this week, it's been a long time since we've ventured into the squared circle and played a wrestling game. We're going to go back to 1989 and we're going to play one for the Nintendo Entertainment System that was one of the most in-demand and popular titles of its era. But it's also one that has aged the worst and shows that in comparison to what I still believe is the greatest wrestling game of all time, which is the original NES Pro Wrestling, which is in the very, very first episode and is always the screen cap you see when I promote this series on other videos on the channel. A lot of people thought this one was going to be better, and as I hope to show over the next 30 minutes or so, it really wasn't. This game was created by Acclaim. It was produced in 1988. Like I said, it came out in North America February 1989, also in Europe later on that year. Now, how this game works is you get to pick from 6 wrestlers: Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, the Honky Tonk Man, and Bam Bam Bigelow. So I'm just going to pick one player, and we're just going to do standard matches here. We're not going to do a tournament. So I got to pick plug my name in here. So now we will go to choose from our wrestlers. And all you have to do to filter through these is push down. So you see there's Honky Tonk, there's Macho Man, there's Andre the Giant, 8th wonder of the world, there's Hulk Hogan, and then we're back to Ted DiBiase. So you get a mixture of super heavyweights and guys who are a little bit smaller, a bit more athletic. So you didn't always have to pick the biggest guys. I'm going to go with Randy Savage because of this bunch, he was probably my favorite. I'm not going to put him up against Andre. That'd be nuts. I'm not going to put him up against Hogan. That'd be nuts. I think what I will do is I will put him up against Honky Tonk Man. We'll see what we can do in this. Now, these two actually wrestled against each other quite a bit back in the late 80s because they were both fighting for what was called at the time the Intercontinental Championship. If I remember right, it was the belt you could hold right below being the heavyweight champ, which was Hulk Hogan through this entire era. And yes, I can say that because way back, now nearly 40 years ago, I watched wrestling as most American boys my age at the time did. I watched it because my grandfather was into wrestling, and it was something he watched on a Saturday while I was over there hanging out with him and my grandmother. So my brother was also hugely into it as well, to the point where he took it out on me and used me as a wrestling opponent, whether I wanted to be or not, when we were back home. However many mattresses and box springs we broke in my bedroom over the years, I have no idea. I lost count, but it was a lot, because that basically doubled as a wrestling canvas. So I'm going to pause it really quick right here because I want to give you an idea about this is the entire game. So as you see, there's the energy meters on the outside of both players. Obviously, you whittle that down and you get to a point where you'll be able to pin your opponent and win the match. The bell in the middle is to obviously signify the end of the match. And there is a timer on here, but I don't know how relevant that is. Unlike in pro wrestling, the original NES version, you had a 5-minute time limit. And in most wrestling games, they either did or they didn't set a time limit on each match. Because usually you beat your opponent up, or they beat you up well in advance of that, and you never had to really worry about the clock. Now, being an NES game, all you have is your A and your B button. So your A and your B will likely be attacks, punches, kicks, and then you use the D-pad to move around the ring. You can get up on the turnbuckles, but you can only get up on the ones that are down below, and only certain wrestlers can do that. So I know Macho Man can, because his signature move was his flying elbow drop. But Andre the Giant can't, because he was 7'4" and 500 pounds. And for some reason, they put Bam Bam Bigelow as being too big to get off the ropes, even though I remember his signature move, and he was a big guy. He was like 6'4", almost 400. But he was one of the first wrestlers I knew of who did what was called the moonsault, which was just basically a backflip off the top rope, splashing down on their opponent who was prone on the mat. And for a guy his size, that he could do that was actually really impressive. Unfortunately, it was part of the reason why Bam Bam, his career and unfortunately his life did not last long, because this was back at a time where, you know, guys were getting themselves beat up so much that unfortunately it set that way. Alright, so it looks like my B button is to be able to knock guys down. And I'm using my... so I can do headbutts. But Honky Tonk Man is beating the snot out of me here. Now I can kick. And as you hear in the background, the theme music of each wrestler can be heard. But this is the entire game. And this is why I said at the outset, it's not one that's aged really well. So I am down and I am toast. Unless I can get up before the count of 3, and I didn't, and I have lost. So a fight could take... a match could take, what, barely 5 minutes? But that it really consists of nothing more than punches, kicks, headbutts, running attack, move off the turnbuckle, and a body slam. That there is no real special moves involved in the game. So being able to pull off Macho's flying elbow, which was one of the... to this day, it's still one of the most interesting ways to finish a match, and the most exciting ways I've seen a match ended, was because Randy Macho Man Savage, was not a big guy, but he got such height on his flying elbow drop that he looked like he was coming down out of the rafters sometimes. And he always just managed to place himself right in a spot where you just knew the guy who was on the ground, it was gonna hurt. Even though it's choreographed to make sure that his body and not his elbow delivers the most force, that still hurts, having somebody slam in you from that much distance. So let's see here. Who else can I go with? I'll go Bam Bam. See what I can do with that. And we'll have to take on the big guy, Andre the Giant. Now, if you don't know wrestling, and I don't expect you to, and you're of anything of my generation, then the name Andre the Giant will be fairly familiar to you. Because he was one of those pop culture characters who simply just... he truly was larger than life. There's a documentary that Bill Simmons, formerly of ESPN, put out a couple of years ago. I'm trading headbutts with Andre. That's not good. Even though Bam Bam Bigelow had a fireball tattooed on his skull. So Andre was able to pick me up and drop me. But most people, if you didn't follow wrestling and you know anything about Andre the Giant, you'll know him that he played the giant Fezzik in The Princess Bride, which at this point I'm sure almost everybody in this country across multiple generations has seen at least once. And in that movie, Andre steals a lot of it. Because even though he was a massive human being, he also came off as being very genuinely a sweet human being. And I've seen many an interview over the years with Robin Wright, who played Princess Buttercup in that movie, and she has spoken quite eloquently about Andre, as did the rest of the cast. But she in particular was like, because she was so tiny next to him, as most human beings were. But how at one point, like, they were on set and like she was cold, and Andre took his entire head, her entire hand, and wrapped it around her head, and the warmth of his hand kept her head warm. But his hand was so huge that it was like, I think she compared it to like a normal person grabbing an orange. But people of modern times don't realize the fact that Andre got his start in professional wrestling. And back in the 70s, he was, and well into the 80s. But 70s was his prime, where he was truly the biggest attraction outside of major sports. And in that documentary, they talk about it a lot, about how Andre could not go anywhere and people did not immediately recognize him. When you're 7+ feet tall and you're 450 to 500 pounds, how can you not get recognized by people who can understand who you are? Well, we might as well do it, because this game came out right at the peak of WrestleMania's early success in the 1980s. And that culminated in WrestleMania 3 at the Pontiac Silverdome, which is no longer around, in Detroit, Michigan. And while the best match of that card, depending on who you talk to, was still Randy Macho Man Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the marquee match was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant for the World Heavyweight title. And Vince McMahon, who, I mean, he's got a lot of things that have not helped his legacy at all, as has been well documented in its own right in the last couple of years, understood that in order to make this work, it had to be something truly massive in scale. And it was part of why, I think to this day, WrestleMania 3 was it's still the largest indoor crowd to see a singular sporting event in American history that I know of. Or I shouldn't say a sporting event, but because you know what they say about wrestling. But be that as it may, it was like 94,000 people, they said, were the Pontiac Silverdome. Over the years, that has gotten changed around a lot, and now they're saying that, like most things in wrestling, it was overinflated. But one of the biggest moments in WWE history was when Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre the Giant. At that WrestleMania. So we have yet to even make a significant dent in anybody in this game. And we've lost 3 straight matches. So let's see what we can do against Ted DiBiase. Now, Ted DiBiase, while his name may not be as synonymous as Savage or Andre or Hulk Hogan, was what they used to refer to as a technical wrestler, in that he was really good fundamentally, although in this game, he looks like he's sporting quite a pot belly there. Although he was not the most athletically aesthetic guy, he was a technical wrestler. And by that is that he was really good at executing moves and selling them and making them look really believable. So if you think about it in terms of the choreography of professional wrestling and making it look like guys were really throwing themselves around and really beating the snot out of each other. DiBiase was one of the better guys who did that. Now, you think about later generations, guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, guys who were the biggest, but they had enough skill and athletic prowess that you could put them in the ring and the crowd would eat up what they were watching because they were so good at making everything look both effortless and really, really painful. And that's the whole illusion of professional wrestling. Is that, yes, everything is, the outcomes are scripted, everything is choreographed. But back when I was a kid watching it, both the wrestlers and the promoters and the people who ran wrestling at the time, both including and outside of Vince McMahon, made their best effort to not give away the illusion. It was a parlor trick. It was like a magic show. And a good magician never gives away the trick. And up until about maybe 20 years ago, that was still really first and foremost at the... Here we go. I don't know what those glasses got me, but that was first and foremost on the mind of both the performers and the people who ran professional wrestling. And if you are into watching documentaries and whatnot, and if you've ever watched a documentary called Dark Side of the Ring, then you know a lot of that gets talked about. Stuff like what's called kayfabe. Well, we're doing good here against Ted DiBiase. Could we actually win a match before this is over? I think we could whittle him down a little bit more. We can pop right back up. But how do I pin him? Usually I just press the A or a B button and I can pin him. I keep knocking him down, but I can't pin him yet. All right, he's down. And he's staying down, but he's getting energy back. That's not good. But I can't pin him. Are you kidding? You figure you press A or B in a certain direction and you'd be able to pin him. Now, this is part of the reason why this game is not aged well. One of the many reasons why it hasn't aged well. If you can't put yourself in a position where you can pin your opponent, then what the heck is the point? I have to look this up here. Although by the time I figure it out, he's probably going to get up and kick my butt. See if I can figure this out really fast. So let's see, I can move a wrestler, I can pick a wrestler. Alright, so for Macho Man, how do I pin a guy? So you have to press B up and down. Who thought that control was a good idea? So B up and down. And the opponent must be on the mat. And he's on the mat and he's quite gone. So let's see, B is the kick button, and then and I can't climb the turnbuckle like it says I can, and I can't pin the guy. Are you kidding me? So Ted DiBiase is sitting there laying prone for a good, what, 5 minutes? And this match should be long over. Try it with the D-pad, try it with everything. There we go. My gosh, that was terrible. But that, to me, that exemplifies this game. Is that something that Acclaim got really, really wrong is that they thought that by simply putting WWE, WWF at the time, personalities into the game, that kids were going to want to run out and go buy it. But all it becomes is a slap and kick fest. And that if it takes you that long to figure out just how to pin your opponent, what's the point? In NES Pro Wrestling, I know all I have to do is get my guy down. And when it tells me I can pin him, I just hit the B button and down he goes. It's not more complicated than that. And while this game was fairly highly acclaimed for its time, like I said, it's one where it just has not, I mean, it hasn't aged well. Game Zone gave it 88 out of 100 in its review, but Total Magazine, which, and I don't know exactly when they did this review, they only gave it 30%. And I'm more inclined to think about it for what they're saying about it now as opposed to back in the day. Because even back in 1989, when we bought this game brand spanking new and tried it out, I remember me and my friends were like, this is it? And that speaks a lot of what Acclaim was trying to do in the time. Kind of like what we were talking about last week with the Karate Kid and LJN. LJN, their whole thing was getting licenses for intellectual property that they can turn into crappy video games that they could then sell and make money off of. Acclaim, at this point in their history, was very much looking to do the same thing. They weren't interested in putting out quality games. They were just interested in getting IP that they could slap onto subpar games and convince your parents to go out and buy it for you. And because the WWE was really riding a peak at this point in the mid to late 80s, as they were transitioning into the 90s, and the old guard of the classic superstars from that era were just past their prime and starting their inexorable slide downwards for the next generation. Like I said, your Bret Hart, your Shawn Michaels, your Undertakers, leading into, I think it was the Attitude Era came after that. You know, it was, they were very much riding the crest of a wave, but that wave was getting smaller and smaller the closer it got to shore. And to this day, I don't think many of my friends and my contemporaries who we were all into wrestling at the time played this game for probably more than maybe an hour at most when we got together, and that was on a good day, because then somebody would inevitably bust out either pro wrestling or a different wrestling game for the NES, and we had a lot more fun with that because you had more variety of moves, you had better graphics, you had more challenging gameplay. It was just more engaging. So is this a good game? No, it's not. In a lot of ways, I could almost put this on par with what WWE games have been for the last 5 to 10 years, in that they're broken. It is not really well presented graphically. The characters aren't interesting, even though they're marquee names. Your moveset's really limited. The controls are wonky. The graphics aren't great. And half of what you think you should be able to do in this game, you can't. It's just punch and kick the guy until they go down. There's no suplexes. There's no body slam. There are body slams in it, but trying to pull it, you're better off trying to do long division backwards than trying to execute a body slam or a special move in this game. And you have to remember, on the NES pad, you only had 2 buttons, B and A, and a 4-function D-pad. You didn't have joysticks. You didn't have anything like that. So your ability to execute moves was predicated on your ability to navigate the control pad. And Acclaim made it way, way harder than it ever needed to be, as demonstrated by finally winning a match, but it took 4.5 minutes just to be able to figure out how to pin a guy. What? That should be the easiest thing you can do in any wrestling game, should be a one-stop move. Just boom, down, pin him. They didn't do that. Is this a game they could make today? Well, they're still making WWE games today, but as I said, over the last 10 years, they've been diminishing in quality. I remember, was it WWE 2020 was condemned by the masses as being functionally broken from the off. Controls were awful. The graphics were buggy. It was just a train wreck the second it was made public. I don't know what the current generation of wrestling games are like, because in no large part because I stopped watching wrestling when I was about 13. So as I grew up, I just didn't have any more interest in it. You know, the comic book aspect of what made it interesting to me as a kid, sitting with my granddad and watching on Saturdays, was long gone. The polish had come off for sure. I don't remember the last time I actually watched anything to do with wrestling. I think, if anything, I watched the documentaries about it more than I watch actual wrestling. So they could make it today. They could make, and I know they've done variations of classic games. They did, I think it was Legends of the Ring, came out like 20 years ago, and it's in our wheelhouse of stuff to highlight. So at some point we'll go and check those games out. And if I remember right, they came out for the PS1 and I think the PS2. And they had a lot of the similar characters in it. They had Hogan, they had Macho Man, I think the Ultimate Warrior was in that. I think Bret Hart was even in that, and a couple other mainstay characters. But, I mean, this is WrestleMania from 1988/89 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And if you're brave enough to want to try this game out, or if you have better experience with it than I do, leave it in the comments below. If you're my age and you played this game a lot, tell me your experience about it. Tell me what made it an interesting game for you. I want to know. Because I can't in good conscience put this on the list of great or even good NES games. It just has not aged well at all. But that is Sports Saturday for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you've been enjoying the content, you know how to show up by now. Again, big shout out to everybody who has subscribed over the last couple of weeks / months. We've seen a massive uptick in subscribers here compared to where we started at the beginning of the year. It's not super massive. It's not like we're going to be getting a YouTube plaque anytime soon. But that really wasn't our goal. Our goal was just to put together a channel where we enjoy talking and revisiting classic video games. And that we're having more people find us and stick around and watch is always fun to see. Also, I do have a quick mea culpa from last week. As a viewer pointed out to me, I did have a major faux pas in our NHL 2K6 game when I talked about the original 6 teams. I said the last of the original 6 was the Philadelphia Flyers. I was completely wrong. I had a complete brain fart on that. It was actually the Detroit Red Wings. So I did spend 2 minutes in the penalty box for that infraction. But we will have Sucker Punch Sunday tomorrow, where we play a classic fighting platform-based game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation, as well as our ongoing playthrough of Super Robot Wars Alpha Gaiden on Mondays and Wednesdays. Those new episodes will be coming presently now that we are able to get back and recording since we are through November. Also, programming note, next week for Sports Saturday, we are going to jump back into Season 2 of our NFL 2K2 revisitation and our great what-if scenario of creating the Patriots dynasty without Tom Brady. So be sure to tune in for that. Also, follow us on social media through Instagram and Threads at Ronan's Retrocade to help spread the word about us as we continue to build this channel bigger and better. And as I have hinted over the last couple of weeks, we are going to be opening up a portal on Blue Sky. Coming out of the Thanksgiving holiday, it's just a matter of logistics at this point, but that is coming. Watch this space. My name is Ronan. It's been great to spend the Sports Saturday with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode of Sucker Punch Sunday. Bye.